Men today are weak. Not because the world is too harsh, but because they forgive their own weakness far too easily. They blame their circumstances, wallow in self-pity, and sit around waiting for someone else to save them from a life of mediocrity. But the world does not wait for the weak. The world only bows to those who know how to save themselves. Ho Chi Minh, a man born into poverty, with no assets, no support, and no privilege. Yet he never complained, never cried out, never sat around demanding justice. He set out into the world with nothing but empty hands and a heart of steel, carrying the dream of independence for an entire nation on his shoulders. He crossed through hunger, imprisonment, betrayal, loneliness, and abandonment without surrendering once. If he could conquer circumstances like that, what about you? How much longer are you going to keep making excuses for your failures? In this video, I'll show you how Ho Chi Minh lived, fought and freed an entire nation, not with brute force, but with absolute inner discipline. If you have the guts to face the truth and want to know how to conquer yourself, keep watching. This is a lesson you cannot afford to miss. What you're about to hear next could change the way you see your entire life. Hit subscribe, like, and stay with me, because the final minutes will be the most important. On a scorching morning in June 1911, at Na Rome Wharf, a thin young man with sun-darkened skin stood quietly among a crowd of laborers. His name was Nguyen Tuc Pan. In his possession were only a few coins, a small bag of worn-out clothes, and a dream so vast even he couldn't fully see where it would take him. He could have chosen the easy way, found a mediocre job, married a simple village girl, lived a small, forgettable life like thousands of others trapped in rural obscurity. But he didn't. He chose to leave. He chose to throw himself into the vast unknown, beginning a journey that from the very first step demanded the sacrifice of every personal comfort. During his years wandering foreign lands, Ho Chi Minh took on every job that the lowest of the low could get. Dishwashing, floor scrubbing, hauling loads, cleaning toilets. Every meal was a battle against starvation. Every night was a fight against the freezing cold. No one welcomed him. No one reached out to save him. Alone in strange cities, he had every excuse to complain, curse the world, or give up. But he never did. He treated hardship as necessary training for a greater mission. In letters to friends, he wrote with astonishing calmness about days of hunger and nights spent sick under stairwells. To Ho Chi Minh, suffering was not a reason to stop, and definitely not an excuse to whine. The philosophy of Stoicism teaches, nothing is truly evil unless your mind allows it to be. Nguyen Tuc Pan lived exactly that way. He did not let hunger, cold, or loneliness infiltrate his spirit. Every blow life dealt him became a hammer stroke forging his will. While others looked for ways to avoid suffering, he embraced it like a blacksmith welcomes the fire, knowing it is the only way to forge steel. One winter night in Paris, while working at a small restaurant, a kind-hearted Frenchman asked him, "You're still so young. Why not find an easier job and live a little more comfortably?" Nguyen Tuc Pan simply smiled, his eyes burning bright. "I'm not looking for an easy life. I'm looking for a path." That Frenchman later said he felt like he was standing before a man made of cold, unshakable steel. A man who would not tremble before any hardship. Ho Chi Minh's sacrifice was never noisy or showy. It was silent, relentless, and daily. In every meager meal, every night curled up shivering under a pier, every time he went hungry to save a few coins to buy books. He first conquered himself in the smallest of ways, conquering the craving for comfort, the natural fear of suffering, the temptation to quit. And that was his first and greatest victory. The victory over himself, so he could one day lead a nation to victory over fate itself. In his early years wandering through France, Ho Chi Minh never once had a full night's sleep. A small Asian man in the heart of the city of light, an anonymous figure lost among a crowd of arrogant white faces. A cheap laborer without a country, without rights. While the weak would have quickly resorted to blaming fate and cursing their misfortune, Ho Chi Minh chose the opposite. He accepted every adversity as a necessary part of his journey. When denied a job simply because of the color of his skin, he did not rage. When yelled at and humiliated in Western restaurants, he did not respond with tears or hatred. He held his head high, endured it with quiet disdain, and kept moving forward. Because he understood, complaining changes nothing, only action changes fate. The philosophy of Stoicism teaches, the wise man does not pray for an easy life, he prays to be stronger. Ho Chi Minh lived exactly that way. French colonialists oppressed our people? That was the truth. The Vietnamese were treated with contempt? That was also the truth. But he never let himself drown in blind hatred. He didn't waste time writing songs of lament like the powerless. Instead, he diligently studied French, learned international law, devoured Marx, Rousseau, and Voltaire, to truly understand the nature of freedom, justice, and the machinery of power in this world. He didn't fight with cheap emotion. He prepared for a battle with reason, knowledge, and extraordinary patience. There was a time when he lived in a shabby attic in Paris, gathering scraps of wood from construction sites to heat his tiny room. Around him, other colonial subjects wasted their nights drinking and cursing the French, cursing fate, cursing the heavens. But Ho Chi Minh did not join them. He quietly took notes, attended political seminars, searched for every opportunity to bring the voice of the oppressed into the light. He knew hatred only weighs the soul down. Only rational thought and relentless action could carve a way forward for his people. It was during those harsh, bitter days that he wrote The Demands of the Annamite People and sent it to the Versailles Conference. A short but powerful document demanding freedom and equality for the Vietnamese nation. No one responded. No one cared. Once again, reality crushed hope. But Ho Chi Minh did not collapse. He did not lose heart. Instead, he etched one more lesson deep into his soul. Reality may be brutal, but our will must be even stronger. If at that time he had chosen to sit and cry like so many others, Vietnam would never have had Ho Chi Minh. Vietnam would never have had independence. But he chose action. He chose to face the truth head-on with a heart of steel and a clear mind. And that lesson is worth more than 100 empty speeches. You don't change the world by whining about it. You change the world by changing yourself first. Throughout more than 30 years wandering foreign lands in search of a way to save his nation, Ho Chi Minh never once allowed fleeting emotions to dictate his actions. He didn't raise the flag of rebellion when the people's spirit was still scattered. He didn't rush into an uprising when the world knew nothing about Vietnam. And he certainly didn't commit political suicide through impulsive acts, unlike so many other patriots of his time. He understood a cold truth. Those who let emotion lead the way die long before they ever reach their goals. If you want to change a nation, you need a strategy. You need patience. You must know when to advance and when to wait. During his years in France, Ho Chi Minh didn't foolishly demand independence through violence. He chose to fight on the diplomatic front, in the media, and through international public opinion. When he moved to the Soviet Union, he didn't worship Marxism-Leninism like a blind zealot. He studied political theory as a warrior sharpening his mind for a long, grinding war. Later, when he went to China, he didn't recklessly organize armed forces before a solid foundation was built. Instead, he patiently mobilized the Vietnamese expatriate community, trained cadres, and slowly laid the groundwork for revolution. Every step was calculated. Every action served a clear objective. At no point did Ho Chi Minh let himself be swept away by emotional impulses. Stoic philosophy teaches, anger, anxiety, and haste are the greatest enemies of wisdom. Ho Chi Minh absorbed this truth into every decision he made. When others clamored for spontaneous uprisings, he held them back. When people boiled with fury over oppression, he still called for patience, organization, preparation. No rash moves, no emotional outbursts, no letting rage turn him into a pawn for the enemy to crush. At times, he was criticized for being too slow or too cautious. The impatient mocked him, calling him weak. But they didn't understand. Ho Chi Minh wasn't playing a short game. He was building a lasting national liberation, not staging another doomed rebellion that would vanish into blood and tears like so many before. When Japan overthrew the French in 1945, the once-in-a-lifetime opportunity finally came. By then, Ho Chi Minh had a strong Viet Minh movement behind him, solid public support, and quiet backing from international currents. In just a few months, he led a successful general uprising and won independence for Vietnam, not through massive battles, but because the foundation had been painstakingly laid over 3 relentless decades. Had he acted on impulse, Vietnam would have drowned in blood, Ho Chi Minh would have died a nameless exile in a foreign land, and history would never have known his name. But because he restrained himself, because he thought long-term, because he endured hardship with unbreakable patience, he achieved what thousands of impulsive hotheads could not. He freed a nation with cold reason and strategic brilliance. Most people quit before they ever learn the biggest lesson. But if you're still watching, I know you're different. Hit subscribe, like, and let's go all the way together. Throughout his entire life, Ho Chi Minh never lived for himself, and he never placed his personal ego above the mission of his nation. When people praised him, he refused the grand ceremonies. When they wanted to crown him, erect statues, and lay thrones at his feet after the Day of Independence, he gently brushed it aside with a calm smile. I am merely a small soldier in the great army of the people. To Ho Chi Minh, a man's worth was not measured by hollow fame, but by his willingness to sacrifice his ego for a truth greater than himself. Stoicism teaches, fame, wealth, praise, these are all external to the mind. If they control you, you have made yourself a slave. Ho Chi Minh lived that principle to the fullest. He never let himself be shackled by the vanity that so easily seduces leaders into downfall. Throughout his life, he owned only a few faded khaki outfits, an old pair of rubber sandals, and lived in a simple stilt house deep in the resistance forest. A man who once shook hands with world leaders and made empires like France and America respect him, chose instead to live in the utmost simplicity, to remind himself and his people that ideals are not slogans for display, but sacrifices made in every breath and every smallest decision. Someone once asked him, "Do you have any personal dreams?" Ho Chi Minh simply smiled. "My dream is for my country to be independent, for my people to be free, for everyone to have food and clothing, and for everyone to receive an education." Not a single word about himself. Not a single word about personal glory. Throughout his years of struggle and leadership, he never once demanded even the slightest privilege. Even in his final years, when his health was failing, he refused luxurious treatment or special rest because he knew the country was still poor and the people still burdened. If Ho Chi Minh had lived to satisfy his own ego, he could have easily settled in France after graduation, taken a prestigious position within the colonial government, or even become a famous scholar. But he chose none of those paths. He chose to live as a nameless figure in the shadows, quietly preparing for the day his people would rise. That choice was not just a simple sacrifice. It was a total renunciation of self, a rejection of everything the world calls success, in pursuit of a truth that transcended his own life. In the end, Ho Chi Minh proved by the way he lived that the greatest victory is not over an external enemy, but over one's own ego. A man who can give up everything for a noble ideal, that is the true pinnacle of strength. And it is a lesson every man who claims to be a real man should ask himself, do you live to satisfy a petty ego, or do you live to serve something greater than yourself? One harsh truth must be admitted. While he was roaming the world, enduring hunger, cold, and loneliness to find a path for national salvation, thousands of other Vietnamese chose to bow their heads and live small, fearful lives. They lulled themselves to sleep with sweet excuses. We are too small to change anything. They sought reasons to delay, to run away, to compromise. Meanwhile, Ho Chi Minh, alone, with no resources, no backing, no army, dared to shoulder the heaviest responsibility of all, changing the destiny of an entire nation. You complain that your life is hard, that you have no opportunities. Imagine Ho Chi Minh arriving in Paris, so destitute he didn't even own a decent coat to fend off the freezing winters. Washing dishes in third-rate restaurants, sleeping under train station awnings, enduring endless hunger. But instead of drowning in self-pity, he scraped together every spare coin to buy books, to study languages, to sharpen his mind for the day of action. Ask yourself, if you were in his shoes, would you lift your head and march forward, or collapse in tears and despair? You say you fail because you're unlucky? Chi Minh was rejected by international organizations, looked down upon at major conferences, hunted by secret police, imprisoned in filthy jails across Indochina and Asia. Failure was no stranger to him. But every time he fell, he got back up, without whining, without blaming anyone, without cursing fate. Because he understood a brutal but simple truth. Luck is the reward for those who persevere, not a gift handed to the weak. You cry that you feel alone on your journey? Remember, during those early years seeking a way to save his country, Chi Minh had no companions, no spotlights, no applause, no recognition, only cold nights and foreign streets. But it was precisely in that loneliness that he forged absolute mental independence, a quality far too many men today have lost, needing social media, fake praise, and hollow likes just to feel alive. You believe you lack the resources to succeed? Chi Minh was not born into a noble family. He had no startup capital, no powerful social connections. He had only two things: an unbreakable heart and a will hardened like steel. The real question isn't, do you have enough resources, but rather, do you have the courage to endure hardship, humiliation, loneliness, and failure, and still keep moving forward? Some say times have changed. We don't need to be strong like before. A sweet lie meant to comfort the weak. The truth is, if men today refuse strength, discipline, and self-mastery, who will protect their families? Who will lead their communities? Who will stand against a world that grows more brutal by the day? The price of weakness is not comfort. The price of weakness is slavery, first of the spirit, then of the body. Chi Minh was not a saint. He was a man just like you and me. He knew pain, hunger, and despair. But unlike the crowd, he chose to conquer himself rather than complain. He chose action over waiting. He chose perseverance, even when everything around him was collapsing. That's why today, when his name is mentioned, millions bow their heads in respect, while those who only knew how to whine are long forgotten. You have a choice. You can keep making excuses for your failures, blaming circumstances, and waiting for miracles. Or you can choose the harder path. Take responsibility, break through your own limits, forge yourself like steel and fire. Remember, no one is coming to save you. No one owes you anything. If you want respect, first conquer yourself. If you want to change the world, start by changing the person staring back at you in the mirror every morning. You can choose the easy way, blame society, complain about your background, sit around waiting for life to magically change. But remember, the world owes you nothing. No one will save you from your own weakness. No one will build a statue for you just because you've suffered. The victors are not the ones who suffered the least. They are the ones who turned suffering into a weapon, injustice into motivation, and failure into a launchpad to rise higher. Chi Minh did not wait for anyone to grant him the right to live free. He seized it for himself with unbreakable will, with a mind sharpened through relentless discipline, with patience that outlasted humiliation and loneliness. If he could do it, starting with nothing but sheer determination, then you, with all the resources you have today, what excuse do you have left to keep surrendering? You can keep playing the victim, living a life dictated by others. Or you can start right now. Set aside your excuses, drag yourself out of the swamp of complaints, and build a life you yourself can be proud of. No applause needed, no external validation, just you, becoming stronger than yesterday, day after day. That is how you truly earn your place in this world. Thank you for being here. If you found this video helpful, subscribe, turn on notifications, and like this video. Don't forget to leave a comment so we can spread positivity together.